Welcome to the show. Got a good one for you tonight. And our shows have been really interesting, I think, over the past several years. And I've been reposting some of them to YouTube. Also, just before we get started, just wanted to let you know that I've changed my banking details for anyone who actually supports the show and is paying into the bank. Well, I've changed that. I actually announced it last week, but in the middle of the show. So if you're one of the few people who supports the show, and thank you very much to those who do, just email me at info@windowsontheworld.net. And of course, you can support the show in other ways by going to the home page. But let's get on with it. Really interesting subject, and a subject that I think needs to be talked about, because some of this stuff is all over the internet. Every grifter and charlatan and fake guru is talking about simulation theory. And we're even going to get into hallucinations and the common good. So the title of the show is Simulations, Hallucinations and the Common Good. Well, the world is becoming the victim of the constructs of dullards. This is because true divine inspiration is not part of this technocratic mediocrity that is being pushed. Outside the box, of course, is the only place to be. Make everything subjective, though, and they will be obsessed with their egos, and when conditioned to do so, will surrender them. But with it, what they had forgotten, of course, their divine spark. I'm talking about the masses here as seen by the globalist parasites. And of course, dull is the new interesting, mediocre is the new brilliance, and compliance is the new rebellion. Individual achievement is homogenized into the common good, a deceptive term with two meanings. The common good is an imposed authoritarian rulebook, and there is nothing common or good about it. Its original meaning and intention was usurped a long time ago. A bit like justice, diversity and equality. And there's quite a lot more of those phrases, but not too many, because language has to be simple. Yet, of course, diverse, sustainable and resilient. When individuals are seen as a collective group labelled society, then the less than mediocre is the highest standard, and excellence then disappears. Have you noticed this? This is what ex-communists suffer from: lack of active enthusiasm and amazing tolerance for the dreary. The concept that individuals are a product of and formed by external circumstances is an old socialistic theory, but now we have accepting of reduced responsibility for people's actions in return for them adhering to external rules which are imposed by deception through a deceptive plan and hierarchy. In other words, being conned. The result of this is mental and physical stagnation, as they go hand in hand, of course, when unchecked. Nothing more than mediocre is necessary, and innovation and creativity are no longer recognised. As we can see, this has happened, and it's been happening for quite a few years now. Done several shows on it. We did one actually called The Cult of Mediocrity. The amount of attention given to artificial intelligence, which is what is known as an oxymoron, because there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. We did a show on that a while ago, actually. Defining intelligence as basic cognitive ability has nothing to do with conscious, heightened awareness, of course, or sentience or intelligence, which cannot be contained in a computer or a program. There used to be a thing called thinking outside the box, which I referred to at the beginning of the show, and this is now not included within the box, of course. That's where the on the spectrum brigade have actually fallen down. It's all very dreary. The past failures of communistic ideas has led to the concept of the current focus on community, global community. The concept of global systems which are run by banks and corporations is the new socialism imposed through simple deceptions. Then, of course, the power of NGOs and stakeholders can usurp the real purpose of government. The Starmer regime in the UK is the shining example of this. It was a show I did actually. Do have a listen to it, because I put some interesting stuff in there which I think you will find useful. It's called Global Mafia Win UK Election. Well, of course, drone-like, empty, uttering the sound bites of tyrants and devoid of personality or any form of dynamism. This is the way forward for the ambitious automaton in today's society. One thing is for sure, that over the last 15 years, the erosion of individual thought and action has been severely curtailed. Nothing useful can ever emerge from collectivism imposed from above. The balancing of individual rights with the rights of a fictional community is the cornerstone of communitarianism. No discretion allowed. The created pressure groups driving the C word. Change. The communitarian principle is that all rights come with responsibilities, and individual rights are usurped in favour of the common good. The common good of a system based on simple deception, or a simple deception or three. And of course the real versus the stated goals, the real reason for something and the ostensible reason which is given to the public. The communitarian legal system, where the innocent are sacrificed to appease the outrage which has been created, usually in the media, is now very, very prevalent. I did an article on windowsontheworld.net called UK Communitarian Courts, and I think we can see that in recent verdicts there are now travesties of justice going on. But of course this is for the common good, because people have to feel that the system that they're in and the corporations which govern them are absolutely trustworthy. And of course it's only people who fail. How many times have these shows described the top-down governance system masquerading as a grassroots, or falsely described as coming from the people? Well, of course, people power is not you and never will be unless you form a group outside of what is called people power. Every useful phrase has been usurped, and we hear the word reclaiming. And that's not a bad idea with this sort of language, to actually reclaim it and redefine it. This, of course, has been said many times, but we have to face simple facts that most are not and will never be interested. So, we've mentioned the fourth world wilderness, the wilderness of the mind, the borderless, mindless world, also known as the lostness of the mind, a term which was available on the internet until recently and now seems to have disappeared. I kid you not. The lostness of the mind was referred to as this borderless wilderness of the mind, and it's been talked about for a very, very long time. And when I actually mentioned it on a recent show, I searched for it and the term has disappeared from Google and probably a lot of other search engines too. But if you can find it in relation to the meaningless void and non-world that modern day shamans or charlatans, known as gurus or con men, lead the comfortably numb into, then do please send me the link. The boundaries of fact and fiction are removed. Anything goes, but nothing of any use happens. Accepted dogmas are arrived at by artificial consensus and never by facts. So, the use of collectivism and the communitarianism emerging from failed communism has many strands. Something for everyone, as long as you don't think, but follow. In an ongoing tragicomedy of errors, the guru grifters have become part of the wilderness or lostness of the mind by promoting simulation theory. And the globalists are pushing hallucinogenics. What can possibly go right, or even far right? Well, it's certainly a very useful governing principle to keep the docile comfortably numb. So, yes, where is the talk of perfecting higher conscious awareness? The divinity with which you were born and is yours when, of course, you're aware of it. And, of course, that is the battle. They don't want you to be aware of it because it's materialistic atheism, simulation theory, and now hallucinogenics to get you to be more compliant. Oh yes, everything has a purpose in the system. This is a system of governance for outliers. That's what I'm talking about here. What sort of idiot would fall for it? One without awareness and basic knowledge, probably. Remember, for instance, the acid house and dance scene. And that project blew away the cognitive abilities of many who mindlessly participated in this collectivism. A serious decline, arrested development for life, and worse, mental mental impairment, and people turning into half-wits. And I saw a lot of this. You probably have too. And a lot of those half-wits are now the useful idiots of sustainable development and the globalists. Many of the victims of this are now programmed globalist assets, promoting fake green environmentalism for corporations and the World Bank, of course, and they believe anything if it is presented in simple terms and with a worthy soundbite. Literally, the wilderness of the mind. Everyone was born with certain abilities and talents to develop. To become willingly part of a mind virus, though, a mind virus of nothing, is a crime against humanity. It is to become a willing pawn for corporations, literally a sellout. Simulation theory, the cop-out for cult grifters. The globalist theft of the commons and taking land can be reduced into simulation-based insights, their term for arriving at an intended outcome for their land piracy. So, can you see what I'm getting at here? Simulation theory is being put into the public domain to remove people from the true reality, which is their own divinity, put them in a simulation which they believe to be real because they've been told it is, and then they are led to believe simulation-based insights by people who are imposing this global control system of land piracy and asset theft, also called Agenda 2030. And this is how internal policy is influenced by external parasites, taking over assets and exploiting them for external profit through what is in effect outcome predicted gaming. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a gaming system that they're putting people in, and people are willingly going into it thinking it's really good. And these academics are promoting it. And even the conspiracy guru grifters, I think you've heard people talking about this simulation theory. It is the topic or the subject that is used by the brainless on the internet. If you listen to this stuff, you're wasting your time. I have listened to it and I have wasted my time, by the way. So I do know. But if you look at the definitions of it, which we're going to look at tonight, you'll see that it is really for the retarded. So discretion is removed, consideration is removed, and consensus reality is imposed. Yes, assimilation through simulation and, as we're going to get into later in the show, hallucination. Further mind wilderness, hallucinate into acquiescence. Psychedelic experiences are now part of the programming initiative into collectivism. Through exploiting the pathways opened up, it is the most simple form of brainwashing. Everything is agreeable when cognitive ability is replaced by hallucinogens. These experiences, if not repeated too often, can have the effect of opening the mind, but they are in fact being used to control it and all conscious activity into corporate collectivism. The belief in the banker's cult of Gaia. It controls behaviour from recycling to following goals which are not disclosed, but the acceptable cover story is being imposed and willingly accepted through these lies. In reality, for control and profit, of course. Another useful tool to get collective and voluntary compliance. These victims will never learn or even suspect they are being steered. They are true believers. Just what, of course, is needed. Gurus of waffle endorse the simulation theory as it excuses them from any responsibility in the information field. When hearing the likes of David Icke, talking about it, they try and make it sound scientific, but it's just BS. There is no foundation to it, and there is no foundation to this new system. This is literally the wilderness of the mind. They do not discuss the paranormal as a parallel universe is, of course, a great cop-out. Well, having experienced supernatural events, it's clear that the unseen is real. But one way to degrade it, of course, and degrade real miracles is the use of these terms like simulation theory a globalist wilderness of the mind production, a simple distraction device. Well, I'm going to have a quick break here. I'm going to come back with so much information. So give me a couple of minutes and we shall carry on. Welcome back. Yes, I was just thinking actually about the shows where we've covered the fake gurus who actually use passive meditation techniques to open the minds and indoctrinate the gullible. And this is, of course, no different, but this is just more corporate. That's what we're talking about here. So, yes, I'm going to read out an article that was in the UK Guardian recently, which is one of the major programming devices in the UK. And we're going to be talking about global to local steering through hallucinations, or basically tripping. And we're going to start with a paper from 2017 called Psychedelics, Personality and Political Perspectives, which was actually linked to this article in The Guardian, which we're going to get onto. It says the psychedelic experience, including psychedelic-induced ego dissolution, there you go, surrender your ego to the Gaia cult. The psychedelic experience can effect lasting change in a person's attitudes and beliefs. What do behavioural insights groups, what do the Stasi in the council, the behavioural insights team do? They try and effect lasting change in a person's attitudes and beliefs. So the steering of the middle classes into the mind wilderness is very useful, and this is just merely another tool of compliance. And the paper states, this one about psychedelics, personality and political perspectives, published in 2017, that ego dissolution experienced during a participant's most intense psychedelic experience positively predicted liberal political views, openness and nature relatedness, and negatively predicted authoritarian political views. Well, that's not actually true, because people apparently got steered into what they're calling neo-Nazism through taking psychedelics in one of these papers. So the paper, yes, is from 2017. And well, the authoritarian views, of course, are embedded in the liberal ones. This is the point. So the authoritarianism is actually embedded in these liberal ideas that are being injected into people when they take hallucinogenics. You did know that, didn't you? It's the Gaia cult. You worship the earth and they control it all. It's very simple. You will be pushed into hive cities and they will enjoy the fruits of the earth and the money which results from the new form of pillage and conquest. It says in this study, further work is needed to investigate the nature of the relationship between the peak psychedelic experience and openness to new experiences, egalitarian political views, and, wait for it, concern for the environment. So yes, this is the article we're going to get into now. The UK Guardian, the chosen indoctrination rag for the indoctrinees of this cult. They recently published an article on the hallucinogenic control grid. and it's in their Climate Crisis series. The headline is Trip on Psychedelics, Save the Planet. Yep, Trip on Psychedelics and Save the Planet, the offbeat solution to the climate crisis. Proponents say using hallucinogens can spark consciousness shifts to inspire climate-friendly behaviours. Well, this is nothing but Soma in Brave New World. It's all about getting people to comply with a system which is being imposed on them. But the way that they do it now, of course, is the communitarian way, that it's for the good of everyone. It's for the common good of the whole earth. And this is the premise with which it is all focused. So, in effect, we're talking about the behavioural change unit of the government, but with psychedelics. It says under the banner of Psychedelic Climate Week, yes, there was such a thing, a group of academics, marketers and advocates, in other words, the stakeholders, they'll be there, gathered for a film on pairing magic mushrooms with music, a discussion on funding ketamine-assisted therapy, and a panel on balancing investing and impact with climate and psychedelic capital. You could not make this up. This is Globalism 101 tragicomedy. It says many attendees shared the belief that psychedelic experiences may spark consciousness shifts. Now, this is the paradigm stuff, isn't it? This is getting into the Aquarian conspiracy. The shift in consciousness, remember? Stuff like 2012. Well, all of this has been basically put into this cult of Gaia, which came out, of course, of people like Maurice Strong and Stephen Rockefeller and Edmund de Rothschild. And it says many attendees shared the belief that psychedelic experiences may spark consciousness shifts which can inspire climate-friendly behaviours, said Marissa Feinberg, the founder of Psychedelics for Climate Action. Could it get any more surreal? Psychedelics for Climate Action, which convened the event series. The globalists are laughing out loud at these idiots. The promotion of psychedelics was one of several features of Climate Week that diverged from the usual lineup of platitude-heavy panel talks. Other events included a series of climate-themed discussions and a performance by a drag wrestling collective in a pop-up boxing ring, as well as events filled with dancing, meditation and imbibing cacao. I think that's what the middle classes now take, along with ayahuasca and all the other stuff that they've been told to imbibe by the globalists. Such themes of wellness and personal improvement, it says, come amid growing public anxiety about the climate crisis, to the extent that many younger people do not see themselves having children, and frustration over the faltering progress to move away from fossil fuels. Recently, Psychedelic Climate Week was held in New York, and its aims to collectivise all into climatardery and acquiescence to corporate governance is well underway, and of course has been for the last 25 years. Cristina Figueres, a Costa Rican diplomat who was previously the executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, states, I don't know about drugs, but many people in the climate and biodiversity community are certainly beyond despondent, said Figueres. When you feel angry and despondent, there's a lot of energy there, and you have to take that and turn it into an agency for good. The common good, of course. Figueres said she had started to lead spiritual retreats in locations around the world to help people turn inside and understand what is going on and how they can compost those feelings and emotions in order to strengthen their agency. Imagine that corporate word salad interrupting your altered state. But all for the common good of the World Bank and its chosen predators. Now that would be a useful hallucination, but consensus says it was a bad trip and to do with negative beliefs which originated through abandonment or disappointment during childhood. That's a bit I added, by the way. The sponsors of this event in New York advocate politicians becoming part of the mind wilderness too. Get this. Beyond, this is an organisation called Beyond, it's BEOND, invites politicians to Cancun for free ibogaine treatment. This is what it says on their website. Every single politician at the state or national level, including appointees, may come to our Cancun clinic for ibogaine treatment free. If they do come, ibogaine will improve their cognitive functioning, says Tom Fiegel, co-founder of Beyond. The candidates will be better debaters, better policymakers, better fundraisers, and better public servants. If you start off with a false premise, then hallucinate and carry out somebody else's globalist looting plan, what could possibly go wrong? Well, nothing, of course, because that would be negative, wouldn't it? It says, while we know ibogaine isn't a magic bullet, we knew weeks ago that we wanted to offer Biden and Trump, both of them, sessions with our psychedelic medicine, especially when Biden's senior moments began to accumulate, and particularly when Trump nearly lost his life in Pennsylvania. Well, here they are actually talking about a simulation, of course, because Trump didn't nearly lose his life in Pennsylvania. That was simulation, you know? Why don't they call that simulation theory? Okay, it says, I would pick Trump up at the airport myself, says Tom. Surviving an assassination attempt has to be traumatic and jarring. He will be scarred by the bullet and may have a sense of vulnerability from barely escaping death. The sort of fall into self-deception is absolutely terrifying here, isn't it? It says ibogaine, an African psychedelic shrub, may help the current president with his age-related decline and any future president more clarity of mind and a stronger sense of purpose. They can't do it themselves, says Tom. They have to come to Mexico. Oh, great. So he's still grifting. And this is amazing because the amount of middle-class idiots who get involved in this has increased massively over the past 10 years. And now, of course, they want the President of the United States to go and imbibe this stuff and go and see witch doctors or these entitled middle-class white Europeans who go there and basically form this network among the witch doctors. So, another paper states, this is also linked to the article, the relationship between psychedelic use, mystical experiences, and, wait for it, pro-environmental behaviours. It says, increased openness. This was discussed in a paper known as McLean et al. 2011 and enhanced connectedness, Watts et al. 2017. As a result of such alterations, psychedelic occasional mystical experiences could have implications for people's behaviour and relationship with the natural world, including their pro-environmental behaviour. Now, this is actually known as PEB, by the way, all the way through these papers. So it's a known term, pro-environmental behaviour. So they get you into an altered state of consciousness, and then the programming into pro-environmental behaviour is embedded. The article goes on to say that some people followed other systems like Nazism after having their mind altered. I suppose it's all about what goes in before. Well, having communed myself with nature in altered states, the last thing I was thinking about was Agenda 2030 and the surface distraction of fake environmentalism and the globalist World Bank project. That would have actually spoiled it completely for me. And the trees were not suggesting I do more recycling or reduce my carbon footprint at the time. That would have ruined what is meant to be a rather profound experience, of course. Well, another steering mechanism of the globalists and the grifter gurus is simulation theory. Let's just read out what it is in case people aren't fully versed in this nonsense. The simulation hypothesis proposes that what sentient beings experience as the world is actually a simulated reality. How convenient to make people acquiesce. This is really just Brave New World revisited, rewritten and reclaimed. It says simulated reality such as a computer simulation. Well, people who don't spend all their time on computers will not be aware of anything as a computer simulation. I remember people I used to know who did gaming. They were in a computer simulation because they allowed themselves to be. They let it rule their reality. Whereas myself personally, I live in a wilderness most of the time. I see the sun come up, I see the moon, and I see the stars, and I see nature around me. So that is not a simulation, that is God's creation. So people who spend too much time in front of screens get into these hypotheses. And of course, people who are in front of computers all the time are very easy to control. So it says, yeah, computer simulation in which the sentient beings themselves are constructs. What a cop-out. There has been much debate over this topic in the philosophical discourse and regarding practical application in computing. While the idea has become well known in popular culture, no substantial arguments or evidence exists as of yet in support of the idea having benefits, side effects, or indeed any implications for research in any field of scientific endeavour. Well, it's very useful for behavioural change. They haven't mentioned that, have they? But this is Wikipedia. Yes, the more useless it is, the more use as a distraction, an instrument of apathy and acquiescence in the face of opposition. It is globalistically sound, of course, as it has no basis. So where did this start? In 1969, Konrad Zuse published a book called Calculating Space. It was on automata theory, where he proposed the idea that the universe is the result of computation. Based on the foundations of information and computer science, this is the first documented modern version of the simulation hypothesis. In 2001, philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed the simulation argument, which suggests that if a civilization becomes capable of creating conscious simulation, it could generate so many simulated beings that a randomly chosen conscious entity would almost certainly be in a simulation. Well, I would say this fella's the ideal useful idiot talking this nonsense, because a conscious simulation is basically losing your own awareness and being absorbed into some other reality, some other fake reality, because there's only one reality, there's only one unified field. Once you take yourself out of that, like these idiots do, idiots in my opinion, because they miss the point, then you become acquiescent to programming. It says it could generate so many simulated beings that a randomly chosen conscious entity would almost certainly be in a simulation. In effect, it all comes back to the denial of the infinite and the supernatural, and of course even nature. It is the mind gulag for nerds and those wishing to spin a few yarns and of course get away with it. There is no need for personal responsibility when indulging in such constructs, which is why it is so useful for the globalists. The egghead who waffles about this Nick Bostrom, states, if we don't think that we are currently living in a computer simulation, we are not entitled to believe that we will have descendants who will run lots of such simulations of their forebears. Now, this is, to me, just mind-numbing, really, because they're so outside the divinity of what we've been given that they are, in effect, just drones. So they might as well exist in a simulated world. They may as well just be part of a program, because indeed they are, because they've actually agreed to it and they want to believe it. So that was a quote from Wikipedia, all that stuff. And nothing simulates artificial reality like Wikipedia. Okay, so let's see what his argument actually states. Bostrom's argument rests on the premise that given sufficiently advanced technology, it is possible to represent the populated surface of the Earth without recourse to digital physics, that the qualia experienced by a simulated consciousness are comparable or equivalent to those of a naturally occurring human consciousness. No. Again, they take divinity out of the equation, which is where they fail and become living drones, useful idiots for this globalist agenda. It says, and that one or more levels of simulation within simulations would be feasible given only a modest expenditure of computational resources in the real world. Now, when we go back to very ancient philosophy and the idea of the nature of reality, we get good philosophical debate, like the illusion of Maya, all of these things, which are quite useful in that it makes us delineate between certain things which may be useful to us. This has no use whatsoever. It puts people into a mind gulag. It makes them the equivalent of technocratic automatons with no actual divine spark, which is what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Where is the creative spark in these people? Nowhere. They're sitting around making this stuff up. They create nothing. They will never create anything, because once they believe that they're in a simulation, they will not create. They will not be able to actually evolve, which of course is the whole purpose of it. So this fake intellectualizing comes from having no belief in God or the highest governing authority, which is of course what the global system wants. It is brain damaging and unsatisfactory for anyone seeking a higher reality. It's simply a cop-out for those who sit glued to computers rather than experiencing the wonders of nature and God's providence. It is as empty as Keir Starmer's cranium. Well, those are the notes that I wrote down, because when I actually listened to this stuff, I couldn't believe how banal it was. I just couldn't believe how banal. It has nothing. It has no centre. It has no purpose. It has no creativity, no dynamism. Therefore, we get people worshipping automatons such as Elon Musk and thinking that he's some kind of personality, because there aren't any personalities around, because if everyone's living in a simulation, then everyone's the same, and basically everyone can be created by artificial intelligence, which isn't intelligence. However, I do believe in alternate dimensions and have experienced many supernatural events, as you probably have too, because these are not uncommon. And once I even seemed to go into a time slip, and so did someone I was talking to. So if we talk about alternate realities, this is really fascinating. I was talking to someone and the environment changed as we were walking along this street. And this person was wearing different clothes. I looked at her and she was wearing completely different clothes, and the houses on the street had changed to about 100 years previously. It then disappeared after about 100 yards and everything went back to the way it had been before. So there was something very strange happened. And I know several people who this has happened to. So why aren't they exploring this stuff? Because it's very, very interesting. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine about this, and he'd had the experience, but his experience was even weirder than mine. And it involved things actually moving and reappearing. And these aren't hallucinations. And in my case, it wasn't a hallucination, unless the two people who were involved in this were in a hallucination. But we weren't hallucinating, because when we came out of it into the reality, nothing had changed, but the reality we experienced was the same as the reality when we came out of that back to what was considered to be this particular time we're meant to be in. So things like that I find fascinating. And the sort of denigration of parapsychology and the real supernatural in favour of this nerdy nonsense. And of course, then we've got the likes of Novel Harari and the Sapiens, and this is somebody who, again, should be playing with a computer with a bag of sweets, in my opinion. They have no idea of the divinity. They have no idea of the infinity and the creativity that is going on around them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be stuck in this behavioural change gulag. So the simulation theory keeps away the battle between the powers of light and darkness. If it's a simulation, then nothing is real and nothing really matters. Consciousness comes from the divine, but in the material, anti-divinity model, empty theories like this are produced by, in my opinion, pea-brained academics who are promoted way beyond their usefulness and intelligence into a position where they actually are useful, because they start to influence globalist steering mechanisms like this, like the simulation theory and the use of hallucinogenics to make people act in a more conformity and conformist way. Yes, it's all about conformity. I mean, this of course is why they are called useful idiots by those who pull their strings or pay their wages. But by intelligence, what I mean really is sentience and awareness of that sentience and how it connects and interacts with all that is in the same dimension and time, and also with what isn't in that dimension. Because when we're looking at the true nature of what is around us, then there is a supernatural element there. And what they're trying to do with this is, in my opinion, get rid of it. So we have no magic. If there's no magic, there's no inspiration, there's no divine spark. And it's as simple as that. Where is their experience of divinity? Nowhere. So, in conclusion, steering mechanisms, when used like this, are useful for compliance and acceptance, all for the sake of control by corporate criminals and charlatans. And I include internet gurus and wafflers in this category because they're doing the dirty work of these global parasites. It's a literal spiritual void for the lost souls and the spiritless. Having one's own mind and being aware of it is infinitely preferable. I hope that made some sense to you. And it's something that I've been thinking about since we did that show on AI. Because there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. They've just misused the word intelligence. Machine learning is not intelligence. They say they've gone beyond machine learning, no evidence of that. But the point is, the divine spark of creativity will never be found in a computer chip. So, hope you enjoyed that. And thanks to those who support us. And thanks for all the great comments. I've been uploading some of the older shows to YouTube. And it's a good way of keeping up with people because people tend to comment on there. So, it's also a good way of staying in touch, so I'll keep doing that. Do subscribe to our Odyssey channel, and you can subscribe to us on Spreaker and Podbean. I'll probably be using Podbean by the end of the year. We've talked about that before. But do stay in touch through the website, support the show if you can, and thanks to all of those that do.